The content you're about to enjoy comes from the archives of The Best You. We're devoted to the very best in personal development, with a platform and resources dedicated to inspiring and changing people's lives. At The Best You, we work with the world's leading writers and trainers on the evolution of the self, and people whose journeys have been affected by their work and words. For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co. Hi everyone, it's Bernardo Moya here, founder of The Best You Expo, The Best You Legacy Clubs, and I'm delighted and excited to be able to speak today to Eric Johnston. And very quick bio. So Eric works with individuals to address and resolve the core underlying issues that keep them stuck or constantly repeating the same behaviors. That sounds kind of, I've heard that before. And Eric has worked on behavioral health and addiction treatment for the past 10 years, where he has been the executive director of an outpatient trauma-focused treatment center and was an advisor and director of a business development for neuroscience technology. Everyone loves that word now. A firm that has offered the neuropsychological testing solutions for treatment centers internationally. His professional work experience is broad and extensive, including acting in film and television, business operations, sales and marketing, and restaurant management. This is actually a huge part of Eric's story and one of his on the critical reasons of why he does what he does. So, Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Bernardo. Good to see you.
And, well, congratulations. I mean, the best people out there are people like yourself who's done a lot in their life, and you obviously have, and that gives you vast, massive experience. So what I wanted you to do is obviously just to give us, I mean, I normally like asking, tell us what you do, how tell us who you are, what you do, and how you help people.
Okay. So my name's Eric Johnston. So my approach with people is, I think it's unique because I really try to address trauma. And a lot of people believe that I think the biggest misconception right now is that when you say the word trauma, people typically go, oh, well, I've never experienced that. And what they don't realize is that there are various types of trauma that can be very subtle, what they call micro traumas, where growing up as a kid, based on the way that your parents or whoever your caregivers were, the way they raised you, they may have said things to you that created these core beliefs that you have about the world, about yourself, about how you relate to the world. And that starts to shape your behavior. And that's where I believe people get stuck, is in the very beginning of life, when they start to create these beliefs based on what they learn from their parents. And a lot of times it shapes their own belief about themselves in a negative way. And because of that, eventually what happens is you create behaviors and responses that work for a little while in life. So as a child, it may work. But as you start to grow older, those responses, those behaviors stop working for you. And you then have to come up with a new way of dealing with situations. So when you don't get your way, or when somebody says something to you that's negative to you, you will react in another way to get what you want, or to feel safe, really, because as humans, we want to feel safe in everything we do, right? So if somebody is coming at us with something and says something that we feel is attacking us, we have to respond in a way that protects us. And a lot of times our coping mechanisms and our way of responding is not, it doesn't work. It's negative. So I help people to get unstuck through that stuff.
So I like putting things in context, because I got kind of your bio, but there was a lot of things that you've done in your life with acting and being a restaurant manager. How did you get to where you are today? I mean, funny enough, I run big personal development events. Right. I'm massive into personal development. My background was real estate. What does it have to do with it? I don't know. Maybe I needed help. But, and I was a DJ when I was young, and I would work in bars. And so, I've got vast experience in life. So tell me, how did you get to what you do now? Which obviously, you're an expert and you have vast experience. So how did you come onto the path you're on now?
Well, I think because of all of the different types of fields that I worked, having worked in the film industry, having worked in restaurants, having worked in the corporate world in various capacities, and then jumping over into addiction treatment and behavioral health. And throughout all of those experiences, I was on my own personal journey of personal development and growth and trying to understand where my place was in this world. And through that, I really began to see that honestly, I wasn't a great employee. I always had my own beliefs about how things worked and how people should interact. And I just felt like I needed to go off and discover myself. So this journey led me to really discovering that I don't have to be a manager of people, right? I think we're all good managers of ourselves. We just need to get clear on the direction that we want to go. And I think that's where people get stuck. And what happened for me was I started to see that, I don't need to tell people what to do. I just need to guide them to coming up with their own solutions. And that's where I started to figure out that coaching was the right thing for me. And I started to see that through my own personal journey of discovering my own trauma and discovering what held me back and being able to break through that and find my own power and my own resilience in life, that led me to wanting to help other people to find that. Because our limiting beliefs are what hold us back. And it really... It sounds very cliche, maybe in our world of coaching, but limiting beliefs are at the core.
If you're interested in finding your true purpose, if you're interested in finding your legacy, if you're interested in growing, if you are sick and tired of reading books that don't help you, haven't helped you, or are not helping you, or attending courses and seminars that haven't really had an impact in your life, I invite you to read my book, The Question, Find Your True Purpose, out now. For more information, go to www.thequestion.co. If you're interested in working with me, contributing to the magazine, maybe speaking at any of our many events around the world, partnering or licensing The Best You, go to www.thebestyou.co.
It is, and obviously kind of it is one of the core things in NLP, which I've learned. Obviously, kind of people that have phobias, fears, anxieties, are based on a limiting belief, which obviously you can literally get rid of, within minutes once you show them a new thinking pattern. So, and for a lot of people that don't actually get what a limiting belief is, explain it kind of clearly, because really at the end of the day, it is simple. As you say, it's cliche. But a lot of people don't. They think, well, that's a really complex word. And the fact is, it isn't, is it? It's just kind of a way of summarizing a thought pattern that we have, isn't it?
Sure. So I really look at it, you say limiting beliefs, and if you look at it simply, it makes sense. But I think as human beings, we tend to make things more complex than they really are. And that's how my coaching is too. It's try to keep things as simple as possible. So, like I was talking about, the trauma or the attachment trauma really is what my focus is. As a child, my own personal experience, as a child, my father did the best he could to raise me and to push me as much as he could, right? And the way that he did that was by pointing out how good other people were, okay? So what he was trying to do was push me to strive for more excellence. But because of my my genetic makeup, the way that I saw things, my perspective on life, maybe some of the other trauma, my parents got divorced. I mean, it could be a combination of a lot of things. When he said these things to me, I told myself that I wasn't good enough. So that became my limiting belief. Okay. And over time, as I grew up and I started to excel in certain sports, or I excelled in school, if my dad said, well, you didn't get, that's great, you got a B in this class, but you could have gotten an A. I told myself, oh man, you're such a failure. You're not good enough. And instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to do better next time, I took the reverse. So this limiting belief system, it can actually kind of spiral. You can spiral into these really dark places with these belief systems. And so that's probably a very long drawn out. I just like talking about this stuff all day long. I could sit here and just blab, probably not make much sense, but really that's what it is. And it's just catching it. And I think a lot of it is based in our viewpoint of, well, they did that to me. And it's understanding that they didn't purposely or intentionally try to make me feel bad about myself. That was just my perspective. So it's a matter of trying to change that perspective and see the viewpoint of maybe a different viewpoint of what they were trying to do. Because I used to see it as, oh, my dad was trying to squash me. My dad was trying to squash me. He wasn't trying to squash me. Why would he try to squash his kid? Instead, I saw it from, he was doing the best he could. He was trying to push me. He was trying to motivate me. It was my interpretation of what he said that was holding me back. So all I got to do is change that interpretation.
Yeah, and the interpretation can be based as well on something that you believe you can or can't do, or it can be, but it's always based on something that you believe to be true, that
right.
Can all of a sudden be broken, and all of a sudden you have a new reality where that limiting belief is no longer. Now, right. with a lot of the people that you've helped with addiction, and obviously addiction is a big thing.
Yes.
It's a big thing. And some people, as you pointed out at the beginning, might say, you know what, I just don't, I haven't suffered, or I've never had trauma, or some people might say I've never had a limiting belief, and some people might also ignore the fact that they're addictive or they have an addicted personality. What are your thoughts regarding kind of I'm not saying the common patterns, because there aren't common patterns, but what makes a person addictive, or why is someone addictive?
Well, I think that is the $1 million question. I think the medical community, I think the addiction community, we're all trying to figure out what is that one cause. And typically, these days with research and what's happening in our field, everybody is kind of taking that trauma route. That is the root cause of how addiction begins. Because really, addiction is just another habit. And we all have habits that we get into, right? So I don't think that people get into drinking and drugging with the idea of, I'm just going to go and do this every day, all day. It becomes a habit. And unfortunately, for certain people, whether it's a genetic piece.
I was going to say, is there some genetics in there as well too?
Research has shown that yes, there's definitely a familial genetic line, but I don't think that's the only reason, because I've spoken with a lot of clients that say I had a perfect life. Maybe they had a great grandparent, so it could be the genetic piece, but typically it's something that happened at an early age that triggered this need to jump into this fight or flight sort of mentality, right? So the limbic system gets shocked, right? So our nervous system gets shocked in some way as a child at some point, or maybe not even as a child, maybe a little later in life. Because you see people that went through high school and they got into college and all of a sudden they started drinking or using and became addicted. You see a lot of people with pain that become addicted because these prescription drugs that are out now are extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And we become dependent on those. And once we start to become dependent, then that can lead to the addiction. And at some point there's, it's so complex. There are so many different variables, but I think that trauma and some genetics has to do with it. But there's no one thing.
So for example, with someone that you're trying to assist with some kind of addiction, is that what you do? You look into kind of discovering what the trauma was or why it triggered and it became that habit that it is? Is that what you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So with most of my clients, it's really, it's about learning about their story. We all have stories, and, when you're talking to a client, they can go on and on and on and tell you their story, and that becomes their dependence, I think. But it's really part of the beginning foundation of understanding where my client is and because a lot of times my clients are living in the past. They're living in that story. So understanding the story is important. But once I understand that, then I can uncover those points in life that created these behavior patterns and created these reliances on whether it's certain behaviors, certain substances, certain people, whatever it might be. It's understanding what triggered these beliefs for them that started the behavior patterns.
And then do you focus on what the outcome can be, or getting them to make a new story on how, that they can live a different, better life?
Sure. So the thing about trauma is that because it's so involved with the nervous system, when we experience specific traumatic events, we hold those events in our body. We don't realize that. We think it's just being held up in our head, right? But the reality is that those chemicals, those hormones that are being released from the brain are actually being sent down into the body. So if you think about something that happened in your lifetime that was very, very traumatic or very, I'm losing the word, but very, profound, let's say. If you think about that event,
yes,
and you close your eyes, you feel something in your body. There's a physiological response, right? And that's because that event has stored emotion or stored chemicals and hormones in a specific part of your body. Okay. So what I try to do is I get people to realize where that feeling is in their bodies. And then we can start to focus on integrating that into the rest of your body. Because I think a lot of sickness and a lot of illnesses, mental illness, a lot of different types of challenges occur in the body because of these specific events. Okay. So I try to work with them, and depending on what it is, I am not a clinician. Okay. So a lot of my clients, I have to refer out to clinicians to do specific trauma work, so I'm able to assess where they're at. And then based on what is happening with them, I can either refer them out or I can do breathing exercises. I facilitate breath work, which is a holotropic breath work, which is a specific kind of breathing that actually helps to tap into the limbic system, the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and balance out and regulate your nervous system. That's one technique that I will use to help people to try to integrate those traumas, and then create intentions past that to start creating new belief systems, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, with neuroscience, obviously, a lot of people into neuroscience now, and so what is neuroscience, and how does neuroscience help you assist or understand, kind of where people may be at, and to help them basically kind of overcome whatever it is that they're going through?
So for me, and again, I'm not a doctor. I always make this very clear to people. I'm not a doctor. I am not a therapist. I'm actually, I'm currently I'm getting my master's in industrial and organizational psychology. But my understanding of neuroscience is that our bodies and our brains are connected through our nervous system. Okay. And information is transferred back and forth from the body and the brain, right? And as we have experiences, we pass that information from our brain to our body, and we create responses. And depending on what those experiences are, is the driving factor for how we are going to respond to those events. And that's really kind of the very basics of it.
If you're interested in watching the video content of this interview and many others, or interested in learning from world leaders and teachers, go to www.thebestYou.online.
Tell me, Eric, so you're obviously going to be, and we're delighted to have you at the Expo. I was Googling a little bit about you in the last couple of days as we built up to the webinar, and I was looking at something, and I was quite delighted to see that kind of like on page number 1, I think it was like number 3 or 4, you already appear as a speaker in Google at the Best You Expo. So tell us what you're going to be sharing there, because you're actually going to be speaking at one of the rooms that we launched this year, which is called the Man Cave. And I'm very excited about the Man Cave.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got 8 or 9 breakout rooms, the Inspiration Zone, Empowering Women. And I thought, we need a room that helps and represents, the conversations that men should have too. How we can help either kids, teenagers, but it was very important for me to have that. So what are you going to be sharing at the Best You Expo? And as I said, I'm delighted to have you there. What are you going to be sharing in the Man Cave?
So I think one of the biggest things that men are confronted with is what it actually means to be a man. And, growing up in this competitive world and always having to be better than the next guy. This is kind of based on how I grew up and what it actually means to be a man and the choices that we make as men in life. So, what I want to talk about is going through this process of what we've been talking about. What are these belief systems that you have about yourself that are holding you back? And what are they based in? So, for instance, if I feel like I need to be this buffed, macho guy because that is what people respect, then how am I going to be living my life? I'm probably going to be at the gym 7 days a week. I'm going to be eating, 30 grams or 150 grams of protein. I'm going to be taking my supplements. I'm going to be doing all this and doing all that because that's what's important to me. So I've made the choice that this is how I'm going to live my life. But at the same time, I may be treating women poorly because of my relationship with my mother and the way that she used to shame me because she used to always tell me I was tiny, So it's this dialogue that goes on inside of our heads that tells us stories that causes us to make choices of how we want to live our lives. And then walking through that cycle of finding the real truth and finding our authenticity as a man so that we can discover who we really are and what we really want to be. Because a lot of times we base our lives off of trying to please other people. So it's determining what are the choices that we're making so that we can be authentic and be real in this world and not live these kind of lies of what other people think we should be.
Well, I love the title of your talk anyway, because one of the things that one of the basic things I share in kind of in my book when I talk about it is, are you thinking about what you're thinking about? The title of your talk is, what are you thinking, man? So kind of like, it is kind of like a question, and people say, well, is that the title? Well, yeah, it's a bloody good title, and it's a bloody good question. What the hell are you thinking about?
And there are different ways that you can look at that. Like, what are you thinking, man?
Yeah.
Or what are you thinking, man?
Yeah.
There's different contexts.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to take that and kind of break that down because I think it's a profound question that pertains to everybody's life as a man.
Yeah. It could be, what are you thinking? Like, are you thinking that? Yeah. Because there's not a lot of that going around anyway. My experience is a lot of people don't actually think at all. And they just you get through life, go through life, kind of like, dealing with whatever, I don't know, whatever.
We're asleep. A lot of people are asleep.
Yeah, a lot of people are asleep, and those that even are awake, they're just not necessarily. And I think that's kind of where, when you start spending a little bit more time, just quiet, meditating, just walking or relaxing or just, I find it for me, I like riding bikes, motorcycles. So kind of that's for me is very.
Oh, nice.
Because kind of like, hey, you got the helmet and you got to stay focused. You got to be in the now. You can't be thinking about many things because you get run over by a car or something.
Right.
So,
right.
Well, listen. So, Eric, what else? What else are you going to be sharing there, and why should people come and see you? And why should people come to the event? Well, what's your thoughts?
So, I think if people really want to deal with being stuck, and feeling like, what, I've been successful, I've made a bunch of money, but I just don't feel whole. I feel like something's missing in life. I think we all have different values. And for some, it's money. For some, it's relationships. For some, it's really finding your true self. And then whatever other multitude of wants there are out there. I want to break it down into a simple process of helping people to figure out, okay, what is it? What area of my life is not working? And what is the belief system that I have around that is stopping me, the limiting belief? I've created a process based in, it's about choices. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about. So the choices that we make in every aspect of our life are what drive the outcomes. So if you're making choices in your life that are giving you results that you're not happy with, then you need to look at what is underlying there. And what is the choice that you made that triggered that result? And it's that simple. I mean, I think the thing is we make life so complex. And it's like you talked about. Whenever I am in a place where I can really sit still and be quiet, life is so simple. It's really about taking one step, one foot in front of the other. And if you do that methodically and you make choices that are good for you and healthy and reasonable and respectful, then your outcomes typically will be pretty good.
Oh, they'll definitely be better or different.
Yeah.
Eric, well, listen, thank you so much. How can people find you?
So you can go to www.citizensinrecovery.com. Mm-hmm. That's my website. And you can also go to Citizens in Recovery on Instagram. You can go to facebook.com/Citizens in Recovery. And those are my Instagram and Facebook are my two primary social media outlets.
Well, Eric, listen, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Expo. It's only 95 days away now, so it's around the corner. So I'll be seeing you soon there. And thank you so much and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Bernardo. Have a great day.
Take care. Same to you. All the best.
Bye-bye.
For more information, go to www.thebestyou.co.